In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born, King of the Jews? For we observed his star in the east and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there, ahead of them, went the star that they had seen in the east, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Today, January 6th, is Epiphany, a day that marks the revelation of Christ to the nations. Epiphany reminds us that Jesus did not come just for a select few. He came for all people, for all nations, for all who seek him. One of the most beautiful images of Epiphany is that of gathering. People from different backgrounds, cultures, and even religions coming together in worship. The Magi, often called the wise men, were not Jewish. They were outsiders, travelers from distant lands, and yet they followed a star drawn by God's light and found themselves kneeling before the newborn king. Their story is our story. We too are seekers. We too have been drawn by the light of Christ. And like the Magi, we are invited to offer our worship, to bring our gifts, and to live a life changed. Their journey invites us to reflect on our own. Just as the Magi set out in search of the newborn king, we too are invited to seek Christ and discover what his presence means for our lives. Let's take a closer look at their journey. The Magi arrive in Jerusalem, expecting to find the newborn king of the Jews. They ask, "Where is the child who has been born, King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." This title, King of the Jews, is significant. It is a title given to Jesus at his birth, but it will not appear again until the very end of his earthly life, when it is written above his head on the cross. From the moment he enters the world, Jesus' kingship is tied to both worship and opposition, to both adoration and rejection. But there is another king in this story, Herod. The Magi come seeking the true king, but they first encounter a false one. Herod represents the kind of king the world is used to, a king who rules through fear instead of love, a king who clings to power instead of surrendering to God, a king who destroys life rather than giving it. When Herod hears the Magi's question, he is frightened. So he gathers the religious leaders who confirm that the Messiah is to be born in Bethlehem. But notice this. While the outsiders, the Magi, eagerly set out to find Jesus, the religious insiders stay put. They have all the right information, but they do nothing with it. The Magi, on the other hand, continue their search. They follow the star to Bethlehem, and when they find Jesus, they do something profound. They kneel and worship him. These men of status and wisdom recognize something that Herod and the religious leaders apparently do not. This child is worthy of worship. As an act of devotion, they offer their gifts: gold for a king, frankincense for a priest, myrrh, a burial spice, pointing ahead to the suffering he will endure. Even here, at the very beginning of Jesus' life, the shadow of the cross is present. The one who is born King of the Jews will ultimately reign, not from a throne, but from a cross. The Magi's journey is not just about a visit, it is about transformation. Encountering Christ changes them. After encountering Jesus, the Magi are warned in a dream not to return to Herod, and so they leave for their country by another road. This small detail carries great significance. It is not just about geography, but about transformation. The Magi do not return the same way they came, and neither do we when we truly encounter Christ. When we come before Jesus, worshiping him as King, priest, and Savior, we cannot go back to life as usual. The path we take is different because we are different. This idea of taking a different road challenges us to reflect on our own response to Christ's presence in our lives. Like the Magi, are we open to being changed? Are we willing to let our encounter with Jesus reshape our priorities, our values, our direction? Or do we respond like Herod and the religious leaders of the story, clinging to what is familiar, resisting the call to something new? Epiphany. Epiphany is about seeing clearly, recognizing who Jesus truly is, and allowing that revelation to guide our steps. The Magi's journey reminds us that worship is not just about adoration, but also about obedience. It calls us to follow where God leads, even if it takes us on unfamiliar roads. One of the most striking things about the Magi's journey is that they are not Jewish. They come from the East, foreigners, outsiders to Israel's covenant. Yet, they are among the first to recognize and worship Jesus. This moment in the Gospel of Matthew signals something profound. Jesus has come for all people, not just for Israel, not just for those who are expecting him, but for everyone who seeks him. The Magi's presence foreshadows the radical inclusivity of the gospel, where shepherds and sages alike are welcome. Jews and Gentiles are drawn together. Sinners and saints are invited to kneel before the same Savior. And this theme echoes throughout the ministry of Jesus. He eats with tax collectors and sinners. He heals outsiders like the Roman centurion's servant and the Canaanite woman's daughter. He welcomes the least, the lost, and the overlooked. Even at the very end of Matthew's gospel, Jesus commands his followers to go and make disciples of all nations, extending the invitation of grace to the whole world. Epiphany is not just about the revelation of the light of Christ. It is about who that light shines for. And the answer is clear. It shines for all people. Just as the Magi were drawn to the light of Christ, we are called to be a people who reflect that light to others, not just to those who look like us, think like us, or even believe like us, but to all whom God calls beloved. The Magi's journey reminds us that the kingdom of Christ is not built on exclusion but invitation. So let's reflect on how we are called to journey forward, transformed by the presence of Jesus and ready to share his light with the world. The story of the Magi is more than some tale of long ago because it is our story. Like them, we are seekers, drawn by the light of Christ, searching for truth, longing for something greater than ourselves. And when we encounter Jesus, just as they did, we cannot leave the same way we came. The Magi remind us that true worship leads to transformation. We do not simply kneel before Christ, we rise and walk in his ways. Christ's love is for all people. No one is beyond the reach of his grace. And following Jesus calls us to a different path. The world's ways of power, fear, and self interest cannot define us. Instead, we follow the way of love, humility, and justice. So let us be like the Magi and be led by the light of Christ, not only to worship him, but to follow him wherever that journey may take us.